Thank you. And yes, we are live. I'm here with my new friend Eric. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing well.
Sorry for the technical issues. My second camera died, so I had to improvise a new setup. So I'd like to start my interviews just asking about the guest. Maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself. How were you raised? Were you raised in a Stoic family, or were you raised in a home that had faith or philosophy? Talk us through all that good stuff, all the whole journey, all the way up until today, and how you found yourself with your current worldview.
Okay. I actually grew up Mormon, so my family was multi-generational, basically from the time that Brigham Young landed in the valleys of Salt Lake. So my one of my great great grandparents' name was Stanley Polson Cloward, and he was actually a shoemaker. So he was in the original 144 that made it into the valley with Brigham Young. So that's how far back it goes on, at least on one side of the family. Um, Pretty much grew up in Salt Lake with some time in Virginia, and then did the whole missionary thing when I went to Austria on my mission, and came back, went to college, graduated from college, got married, had two kids, then ended up getting divorced about 7 years after that. Um, and just probably about a year before I got divorced, my ex-wife decided she was done with the church. She didn't grow up a member, but really kind of helped me to decide that it wasn't for me, and it hadn't been for a long time. And so being with her, though, it definitely gave me the support to be able to step back away from it and really make a choice at that time. Because when you're raised in a faith, you oftentimes feel like this is the only way. And if you leave that, then you're abandoning your roots, you're abandoning your tribe. And it took a bit to get to that point. There were some books that were fairly influential on that, which basically exposed a lot of the dirty laundry that the church had been trying to hide for a long time, which then was really like, oh, okay. Joseph Smith really was much more of a con man and a pedophile, for lack of a better term. And at that point, it felt very comfortable to finally leave, because it was like, okay, this is just, it was built on a house of cards. So leaving was something that at that point was probably one of the healthiest things for me. Like I said, I got divorced about a year after that. And then, yeah, after that, lots of searching. Got to do a lot of the things that I should have done in college. So got to go out and explore and figure out the type of life that I wanted to live. Um, and then about 5 years ago, actually, I guess almost 6 years ago, yeah, I guess it would have been January 4th, 6 years ago, um, found Stoic philosophy. So I heard about it from Tim Ferriss on his podcast. He mentioned a couple of books that he had read. One in particular was called the Guide to the Good Life, The Art of Stoic Joy by William Irvine. And he said it was one of the most impactful books he'd ever read in his life. And Tim gives a lot of suggestions on things, but the fact that he ranked that up there, and I was like, The Art of Stoic Joy, the contradiction in terms sounded very interesting to me. Um, so I looked it up, and I was like, okay, I'll give this a read. I didn't know Stoicism was a philosophy. I just heard the term Stoic, and as somebody who was considered Stoic, just didn't show a lot of emotion and whatnot. Excuse me. And then after that, uh, reading the book, there were quite a few things that definitely made sense to me. But there was a lot of stuff that I didn't get, that didn't quite click for me. And so a few months after that, I re-listened to it. I downloaded the audiobook and gave that a listen. And that time of commuting to and from work is about a 20-minute commute at the time. I just had a lot of those aha moments where things just like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, well, I never thought of it that way. And just so many moments where there were some very big perspective shifts on things, that it basically changed how I viewed the world in a fairly dramatic way in a very short time. And then this was back in 2017. And then 2018, I decided that I wanted to start a podcast. And I was like, well, I'll do a test podcast. I will make a podcast just to practice making a podcast. And since I was studying Stoic philosophy at the time, I got in Ryan Holiday's daily journal, And just everything I learned, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And so I was just, like I said, I started a podcast. I'm a musician, and so I have plenty of audio gear and everything like that. Um, Less so now because I sold everything I had and I'm traveling to Europe. But at the time, I had, several $1,000s in high end audio gear and stuff like that. But it was too intimidating. So I did a first probably 50 episodes just on my iPhone and just recorded them with my earbuds. And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to do it this way because I just needed to step up and actually do it. And from that point on, after doing, I remember I hit about 5 episodes and I had like 43 downloads, and I was like, oh, people are actually listening to me. This is kind of cool. By the time I hit 50, I think I hit about 10,000 downloads and was just like, okay, this is a thing. People are actually paying attention to what I have to say. And I did 137 episodes in a row. So that was every single day for 137 days. And then from once I hit that point, I was like, okay, this needs to become a weekly thing because it's just a lot of work. And I had 2 teenagers and I had a full-time relationship at the time, plus a full-time job. And there was just a lot going on. And so I changed it to a weekly thing, did another 30 episodes, took a break for a while, kind of came back to it, took another break, and then started up almost 2 years ago again, and have been doing it strong ever since then. And for me, it's very much a philosophy that is about your perspective on life. It's very practical, very pragmatic philosophy. There's not a lot of esoteric stuff where you're wondering if there's alternate universes, or there's not a lot of pondering the imponderables. But how do you live a good life? How do you find tools that you can use to form your perspectives on things, that you can test the world around you, that you can understand your perspective on the world is really what shapes your reality. And you often hear that, your reality is shaped by your perception, and a lot of people think that means that you can make your own reality. And in a way we do, but it's not in the idea that when people talk about, oh, I manifested this thing, I wanted this thing and it just showed up in my life, which is always the whole secret thing, just that doesn't jive with me at all. It's much more about, you can look at the same thing through different lenses or through different perspectives and see the situation totally differently. And so it's much more about choosing your reality, in that you can choose how you view certain things. You can choose, a simple example is, I think it's called Harlan's razor, which is, don't assume malice when ignorance is more likely. And you don't immediately assume that when somebody does something, they're out to get you, but assume that they're doing it out of a place of ignorance. They don't know that this is going to harm you. They don't understand the consequences of the things they're doing, but they're not necessarily out to get you. So that's a very Stoic thing as well. Is about it's your perspective on something that really informs how you view the world, how you interact with the world, what the world means to you. And that when it really comes down to it, your perspective is one of the only things you have any control over. And I think that for me was a really big eye opener of looking at things, that when I would get mad about things, when I get upset about things, it was much more because of what I made those things mean that caused that, than it was the actual thing itself. And so I think that's a big part of Stoicism. I think that's why it really kind of resonated with me. And it's something that I've worked really hard to apply in my everyday life so that I can live a much happier life, because for a long time I was very unhappy. Growing up in a very restrictive environment, growing up in a fairly violent home. When the violence stopped as I got older and bigger, there was still a lot of emotional violence, um, from my father, and just a lot of unhappiness. And it took a long time to recognize that I could actually do something about that. That it wasn't all of these external things that were happening. It was the way that I perceived the world that really informed how I felt about it.
Pretty cool journey. So, congratulations on discovering this and running with it, and having the courage to start the podcast, and it worked. When you were talking about the secret, I was just cringing because just that all that new age stuff is so cringy. And the secret that they're selling is a satanic lie. It's that you can have what you want, but the real secret is the Stoic secret, which is that you can want what you have. Like that's the difference. There's always a satanic inversion of these good wholesome principles, and there's a lot of overlap between Christianity and Stoicism in terms of principles. And one of the principles is uh, be content. Be content with what you have, and that doesn't mean necessarily just what objects you have. I have a house, I have a car, I have a wife, whatever. Not that your wife's an object, but it's not just about the things that you can reach out and touch. It's also about the circumstances themselves, or it might even be the moods, like whatever it is that you're experiencing. From a Christian perspective, we say that we give thanks for that. We thank God for that. So, hey, I just found out I got cancer. Thank God. Read the book of Job. The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's Stoicism right there.
Yeah, I mean, Stoicism is very much about the idea. One of the ideas that they have in there is called amor fati, which means to love fate. And what that means is that the universe doesn't care what it gives you; it just simply gives you, and or the universe, life, whatever you want to call it, the thing that is happening in your daily life, everything that happens, whether you ascribe that to some external god or to just nature or whatever, it's not out to get you, but it's not out there to support you necessarily either. It's indifferent. It's just that these things happen in life, and you can choose to either hate it or you can choose to love it. And it doesn't care. You can absolutely be mad about everything that happens in your life. And I know people who are that way, and they blame everything that happens to them. All these things that happen to them is never their fault. It's the world is out to get them, and they have this view that there's a negative force in the world that is out to make their lives terrible. And you can view it that way. That's always your choice. Or you can just accept that these are the things that are happening to me. And even if you don't love all of the things that happen to you, you can at least accept that these are the things that are happening to you because that's reality. They're happening to you. Like you said, you get cancer, you've got cancer. And you can either be mad at the world and hate everybody and everything about it because you got cancer, or you can at least be accepting of that and go, yep, I have cancer. Now, what am I going to do about it? I can sit and bemoan it. I can sit and be mad that I got it, but it isn't going to change that you got it.
It'll just make it worse.
Yeah, well, it's the whole thing of, like I said, your perspective on it isn't going to actually change it. It's going to change what you do about it. It's going to change how you feel about it, but it isn't actually going to change it. So if I hate the fact that I have cancer, it doesn't change that I have cancer. I just do.
Well, I think
And
I think
so,
it does actually affect it. I think that if you are, you know, not to sound new age, but if you're bringing bad vibes onto the situation, you're just helping to grow the cancer. Like, I mean, there is cause and effect. And if you're full of fear and hatred and anger and resentment, all these sorts of things, there are consequences for that. I think you are growing your cancer. So, to be accepting, to be at peace, to be stoic, to be, loving and content. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not good at it, but this is the goal, for the Christian, is to be at peace. And uh, there's so much to Christian mysticism that is mirrored in the Eastern religions and philosophies. And Stoicism is sort of like a strange philosophy because it's considered a Western development, but it's got a lot of Eastern elements. Have you looked into the origins of it and the sort of the whole timeline and how it's developed, this school? Because it's sort of considered like an obsolete or a dead school, but it's still there. And I mean, like one of my favorite philosophers, Nietzsche, he was heavily influenced by Stoicism. Have you looked at the sort of
mhm.
golden thread throughout the history?
Yeah, so where some of it comes from, it's the originator of it was this guy named Zeno of Citium. And Zeno was a merchant who was he was on a ship, and they got in a shipwreck outside of Athens. Luckily, he washed up on shore, but he lost all of his cargo and everything like that. I think he was a fabric merchant, and so he lost everything. He basically had no money at that point, and so he washed up in Athens and was like, "Oh crap, what do I do now?" And while he was trying to decide what to do about this whole thing, he'd stopped by a bookshop, and he found Xenophon's. Uh, Xenophon was a general back in, I think, in Greece, and found his uh, what am I think, biographies. He did a bunch of biographies on different people, and one of those was about Socrates.
Mhm.
And he was like, "This Socrates person sounds amazing. Oh, I I've never heard of anybody like this." He was just absolutely enthralled with this idea. So I went to the bookseller and he said, "Hey, can you teach me? Can you point me to somebody who can teach me like this? Because this is something that will change my life, and I need to find someone like that." And right at that time, Crates, who was a cynic of the school of the Cynics, which was very much about uh, questioning everything, questioning your senses, questioning reality, questioning all of that, but we're still in kind of the Socratic tradition, happened to be walking by. And so the bookseller said, "That guy, he can help you." So he went out there and he was like, "Okay, what do I do? How do I learn to become like Socrates? How do I learn to become this type of person? Because I feel like I've been lost my whole life. And here I found this thing, this person who has opened my eyes to understanding my own mind, my own world in a way that I never thought of before." And so Crates took him on as a student. Excuse me. And then after that, after learning about this and obviously learning more about Socrates and reading up on the other authors and stuff like that, he would go down to what was called the Stoia in Athens, which means the painted porch, which is where Stoicism comes from. It was basically, it means porch philosophy for a close translation. And he would stand out there and he would talk about the things that he was learning. He was just trying to teach people like, hey, this is a better way to look at the world. And a lot of it was because Socrates was very big on asking lots of questions. He wanted to understand the world. He wanted to understand his own mind. And by doing so, Zeno was able to basically almost develop tools in a way that allowed you to, kind of like the end product of Socrates' questioning. These were tools that you could use, like, hey, there's very little you control in your life. You control how you think about things, you control what you do about things. And that's really about it. Like, you don't even control your own body. Like we mentioned earlier, you get cancer. You didn't want cancer, but you got it. And so you can't even control your own body very well, but you can control what you do about these things. And so through that, he taught a lot of that, which then the other main teachers were Seneca, as well as Epictetus, and then obviously Marcus Aurelius is one of the most
Mm.
well known. He was the emperor of Rome, and so that's kind of the through line of where the philosophy came from. So it was very much the Greco-Roman traditions along that, and a lot of it just came through just really questioning reality in a way that, and questioning yourself and looking inward to try and understand the world rather than looking for answers outside of these things. And so as far as its relationship to Buddhism, I'm sure that because of trade between Greece and India and other things like that, that some of these ideas slowly came over. But I don't know of any direct lines of that. But I do talk, when I talk with people, I mention that to me, Stoicism is like Greco-Roman Buddhism. And I was talking to another guy for my podcast a couple of weeks ago, which I'll be posting in the next, either this episode or the next one. And he was like, "Yeah," it goes, "To me, I imagine that like if you got Marcus Aurelius and the Buddha together and they started discussing something, and then pretty soon they'd be chest bumping, going, 'Yeah, exactly, that's the way it should be,'" because it is a very much, there's so little that you can control, and there's so much of our unhappiness comes on to because of our attachments to things outside of ourselves, whether that's possessions, whether that's to wanting things to be a certain way, wanting to control other people, those type of things. Those are all things outside of our control. And until we understand that, recognize that, and recognize all we have control over again is the way that we think about things and the way that we respond to things. And when you focus on those things, that's where you can have the most impact on your life. And I think too many people spend a lot of time trying to change the people around them, trying to get money, trying to get cars, trying to get houses, trying to get all of these things to try and change who they are inside and to make them happy. Whereas a prime example of this, like I said, I recently sold my house and I got rid of everything. So I don't have a home anymore right now. I'm actually just traveling and I'm going to be heading over to Europe soon. And so my worldly possessions are I have a few bins back in my brother's place, including and I also have a bicycle, a keyboard, and a guitar back there. And then I have two suitcases and a backpack. That's it.
Cool.
But I would say that my level of happiness hasn't increased dramatically. My level of feeling free because I don't have this house that I have to tend to and all of these things anymore. I feel much more free, but I would say that my happiness is probably right about the same because owning a house, not owning a house, it doesn't change who I am essentially. And I think that a lot of people think that if I get this job or I buy that house or I get this girlfriend or I get whatever it is, they're looking for those external things to validate their internal existence. And it never really seems to work out that way.
Uh, just wondering if you've, because your main focus is Stoicism. Obviously, that's your main interest, and it's really helped you a lot. And so it's more than just a hobby, I think. For you, it's a way of life. Um, but and that's how it was when I was studying philosophy too. Like I just did a deep dive into everything I was encountering because I did a chronological overview of the Western tradition. And my favorite eras are the pre-Socratics, and then Socrates is my number one favorite, and Plato, by extension, and with Aristotle it dips a little bit, but really that's like the golden era for me. But I'm just curious what you think about existentialism, some of the very more modern stuff, existentialism, um, and what's the other one with Husserl, where you do the bracketing? I forget what that one's called. Phenomenology.
Don't know anything about phenomenology. I read a little bit on existentialism a few years ago and kind of got the gist of it, but I haven't followed up on it, so I kind of forgot a bit about it. But um, I know that some people take it to they take existentialism to an extreme, which is that nothing matters. So it almost turns into a kind of a nihilism at that point. Um, but
Yeah,
I
the
did
basic
appreciate.
idea the basic idea is like there's a stoicism that's built into it because there's no objective meaning. The onus necessarily falls on the individual to look inward and to
Yeah, that's right.
build, to rebuild. And so there's a freedom in it. And I'm not saying that it's perfect, but it's a very interesting path in all the branches of Western philosophy that I've explored. I mean, it's one of the more interesting ones, and it's fairly recent. And there's this idea that you build your own reality. Again, going back to this sort of New Age thing where they've perverted that, and sort of got some sort of Gnostic ideas mixed in with it. But the basic Stoic idea at the heart of it is that you take responsibility. That's the key word, is responsibility. I'm just wondering if that ties in, if that rings a bell and resonates with you.
Oh, for sure. I think that more than anything, Stoicism truly is about taking responsibility for your perspective. And like I said, it takes responsibility for the things you can control. And those are how you view the world, your perspective on things, and what you do in the world. You take responsibility for your actions. You have choices for those things. And so, pretty much anything you do in life, you have to take responsibility for because it's your choice to do that thing. It's your choice to react that way. It's your choice to do those things. I mean, unless you always have a choice. When people, go, I didn't have a choice. I had to do this thing or I had to act that way. You always have a choice in every situation. You may not like the limited choices that you have in a situation, but you always have a choice in any situation. And that makes it challenging for some people because sometimes owning the things you do can be really hard because we all like to have excuses for why we did the things that aren't good about us. And so stepping up and taking responsibility for everything and anything you do can be daunting for a lot of people. People want to have excuses. Oh, I mean, that's oftentimes why people will get drunk. So because they will do the things that they wouldn't do otherwise. They'll go up and talk to that girl at the party because when they're drunk because doing it sober was something that was too hard for them. So, oh, that way they, they can plausible deniability in a way. Oh, I was drunk when I said that
Uh-huh.
thing.
Uh-huh.
And I've seen people in many situations do things like that. They will find ways to kind of skirt having to take responsibility for the things that they really want to do. And so just owning everything that you want to do, like sometimes you might be a bit short with somebody, or you might be a little bit rude with somebody, but at least own that and say, yes, you know what, I was rude. And if it's not something that goes against your principles, you should never feel like you have to, not take responsibility for it. And I think that's a hard lesson for a lot of people, and that comes to, I guess, to explain that a little bit deeper, is the idea of pure integrity. And that means that you live your life in such a way that, and according to your principles, in such a way that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or says about you. If you are living your principles in the way that you feel is correct, you never have to apologize. You never have to shirk ownership or responsibility for it, because you're living exactly the way that you think that you should. Now, that may change later on. You may come to a point where you recognize, oh, you know what? This was how I acted, and I thought I was holding this principle. I was wrong, and so you have to own that as well. But that's something that a lot of people, it's a very hard thing to do, because we are socially driven. We like people to like us, and so oftentimes we will do things to get other people to like us. A good example of that is when you have to set boundaries with somebody. If you set a boundary with somebody, oftentimes they'll get really upset about that. They will get angry with you because you're doing that. Just because somebody got angry at you doesn't mean you did anything wrong. They may not like the fact that you're setting a boundary. If you say that your mother comes over every day at 10 o'clock, and you're like, Mom, you don't need to come over to my house every day. Well, I want to see the grandkids. That's great, but you need to call me before you come over, and it's not cool for you to just show up at my house. Your mom might be upset about that, but you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't violate any principles, and you were holding to that. I mean, I know that's kind of a not the best example, but it is an example of how that can be. That just because somebody doesn't like what you do or is upset with what you're doing, doesn't mean that you're doing the wrong thing. And that's a hard place to get to, because we want people to like us. So oftentimes, if somebody's upset with us, we have it's a challenge to go, no, I'm not, I'm following my principles. I didn't do anything that I feel was out of line. I'm good with what I did, and I own responsibility. And if you're not, if you go, you know what, I was a little bit harsh with that person, or no, I didn't act in a way that I'm proud of, then you own that too. And you step up and you try and fix that thing that you did wrong. And that's a hard thing to do for, I think, almost anybody.
Yeah, so I'm sure you've read all kinds of philosophers talking about virtue, and I was just wondering how you define it. I mean, it's just basically manliness and excellence, I guess. But how do you see virtue playing out with a Stoic twist? And what are your favorite virtues, the ones that you wish you had? Which ones, which vices, without, embarrassing yourself too much, what are your vices that you're most prone to, gluttony or sloth, whatever. Just talk about virtue and vice, and where your strengths and weaknesses might be, again, without embarrassing yourself or bragging.
Well, I don't consider virtue manly or anything like that. I just consider virtue just being a good person.
Yeah, but it comes from
And
the word vir, which means man. That's why it's manliness.
yeah, but I think that also comes from a very fairly misogynistic background, which says that women couldn't be virtuous, and I find that to be that's oftentimes I want to point that out. Just because a word has a particular origin doesn't mean that it was necessarily correct. I mean, that to me, I see it as that's something where back in the day, yes, that was how it was, but doesn't mean that it's right either. And so owning up to that and pointing those things out is something that's very important to me, because people will use things like that. Well, virtue comes from virility, and so women can't be virtuous. It's like, oh, sorry.
I believe
we're
women can
not
be
in the
virtuous. I
1920s.
believe women can and must be virtuous. But
Yeah,
the men who came up with this, and let's be honest, it was men who came up with it. And you can blame a misogynistic society if you want, but it was men who came up with it, and it's still men who are doing
for sure.
philosophy. We're both men. We're both I don't know what your audience is like, or your friends who talk about philosophy, but I'm pretty sure it's 95% men. So there are differences. Women can and must be virtuous, but when it comes to creating a philosophy like Stoicism, it was men who did it. You know what I mean?
Well, it was men because they were the ones who were in charge of society and because they wouldn't allow women to participate in society.
Yeah, but
So
even
it's
now
kind
the
of like
women
the
are
idea.
welcome. Women are welcome on my podcast, but it's like
Absolutely.
it's hard to find women that are interested in philosophy. You know,
Well, my listenership is about 40-60. So yes,
really,
it is more men, but yes, I have about 40% women.
really,
And and honestly, the ones who contact me the most, I have more women contacting me than men contacting me
because they find you
who are
attractive.
interested.
It's that voice.
The
It's
one-
the voice.
yeah, I don't know, but it's just more that my point is that it's kind of like saying there aren't a lot of great women sci-fi writers, and so therefore women can't write sci-fi. Well, sci-fi writing used to be a man's club, and so when women would write stuff, they wouldn't listen, they wouldn't even look at it, they wouldn't even publish it, they wouldn't even talk to them, just because they were a woman. So to say that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when you do things like that, and that's why plenty of authors would just use pen names like that, and they were written by women because if it was found out they were written by women, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this can't be in sci-fi."
So
So
Zeno was really Xena. Okay, I got it. I
could
got
be,
it.
could
Yeah.
be. But my point is that they were denied the ability to get the education. They were denied the ability to do those things. And Masonius Rufus, who was also one of the early Stoics as well, talked about in his writings actually wrote that women are just as capable in philosophy as men, and it should not make one difference if it's a woman who wants to learn philosophy or a man who wants to learn philosophy. They should all be allowed to learn philosophy. So he was very progressive in that, and he just said it doesn't matter, a person is a person. And that was something that I found very, very interesting back then. um, but as far as virtue, what that goes is, for me, a lot of virtue.
Just for fun, I looked it up. In modern day philosophy departments and in academia and elsewhere, 71.2% of professional philosophers are men. So it seems like quite an imbalance there.
Yeah, but like I said, I
I
work in
know.
IT, and so I see that imbalance as well. And it
Yeah,
was because growing up, women weren't supposed to be good at math. They aren't supposed to be good at those things, so they were discouraged to even go into those things.
yeah.
Whereas I remember in elementary school, there were plenty of women in my math class who were just as good at math or better than me, and I was usually one of the top students. But they were encouraged to go into teaching. They were encouraged to become secretaries or nurses or other things like that. And so a lot of it is society based. And I think that as we move forward, that we'll be seeing, I mean, these are tectonic shifts that we're talking about. They take a long, slow time to shift those things over because of those things.
Yeah,
But
I
anyway,
just want
back
to
on
say
virtue.
I want to beat the dead horse just a little bit more, a little bit more. I want to beat
Hmm.
this dead horse. I'm married for 28 years now. A wonderful woman. She's a Greek woman. Okay, so she's more stoic than I am in more ways than one. She's very stoic, but she's not interested in ideas. She's not interested in philosophy. She hates it. So
Hmm.
it's just one woman, small sample size. Okay, but it's like there. I think that there is built into the male something that's missing from the female, and vice versa. We're complementary, and I really do believe, that there are more men that are interested in chess, in philosophy, and in all these sorts of intellectual heady things than there are women. I think the women are into reality. They like to have a pragmatic, practical relationship with family and friends and the world, and you know what I mean. I think it's like
And yeah,
completely
but
different.
you're playing.
They're completely different. Men and women are completely different. That's my hunch.
Well, I'll disagree with you on that because of cultures. I've lived in multiple different cultures, and I've seen how culture influences that fairly dramatically. So, and that may be your perspective, and that's fine for you to have
Which
that
culture
perspective.
do the
But
women? Which culture do the women dominate on intellectual hobbies
well,
and
that's what I'm saying. What I'm
which
saying
culture?
is that because our cultures don't allow that, and but then you go into cultures where that
Right.
is better. I mean, did you? Okay, I mean, right now that colleges right now are 55% women. So are we saying that men are too stupid to get into college now? No, it's because back in the day, women weren't encouraged to go to college. They were told not to go to college. They were told to get married and have kids. And so when you have a large section of your population that are discouraged from going out and getting educated, of course they're not going to be interested in these ideas because that is not what is expected of them. But if you have a larger cohort, you have a larger pool to draw from, you will eventually start to even things out on that. And that's my point, though, is that the culture itself is what keeps women from doing a lot of those things. Because there are plenty of women that I've talked to who are like, "Oh yeah, I wanted to go and be a doctor, but I wasn't encouraged to do so." I mean, I grew up in Salt Lake, where the best thing for a woman to do was to go to college to find a husband. That was the point of going to college. It was not to have a career. It was not to have higher education. It was to go and get a husband. That was the most important job for them.
Yeah. You had a point you wanted to move on to, but first, I just want to ask you, what's your ideal utopia when it comes to the relationship between the two sexes? And there are only two sexes. I hope you agree with me. There are only two sexes.
No, I disagree with you on that too,
Okay.
because well, yes, two
What's the
sexes,
third
but
sex?
multiple genders.
Okay.
But there are multiple genders, and so understanding the difference between sex and gender is very important. And I've met people from all walks of life, and for me, it shouldn't matter what somebody considers themselves on those things. If that's how they feel, if that's who they are, then
But
allow them that space to be that. And
my question
coming
is
down
about,
hard on
yeah,
people,
my question is about the future, your ideal future, and the relationship between the two sexes. And if you can avoid the topic of gender because it's not really relevant. I'm just talking about the two sexes in the future, in some utopian future. What would it look like? Because for me, the ideal future would be, and the relationship between the two sexes would be that the woman is a mother, a wife and a mother primarily, and not a CEO or a lawyer or a doctor.
why?
That
Why not?
because of the family, because society is built upon the fabric of the, the family is the
Society
fabric of
is,
society.
but that, again, that's a cultural choice. Those are cultural choices that we have set up, that women are the ones who are supposed to stay home and take the kids. Why isn't it that your wife couldn't have a kid? You stay home and take the kid, and she gets to go off to work and do the thing that she wants to do.
So, what do you see as the ideal utopian future in the relationship between the sexes? Just paint me a little picture.
I don't think there should be any expectations that we should put on other people for the relationships that they choose to have. I have plenty of friends, several of them, several couples who have kids where the father is stay-at-home dad and very happy doing so and is much better suited than the woman in the relationship to do that.
Yeah,
And so for me to step in and try and dictate those things in a
yeah.
societal sort of way, that's what I call bullshit on and I think is ridiculous.
I don't want
Everybody
to
needs to be
impose
able
it.
to
I
make
don't
their
want to
choices on
impose
that.
it. But if I'm gonna dream, if I'm gonna
Well,
dream
I'm not
about
gonna
it,
dream.
you're
My
not gonna
dream
dream.
is
You're not
that
gonna dream.
everybody gets to decide how they wanna choose and live
Yeah.
their lives that way.
Yeah. My
And
dream would be that I don't have to go to work anymore, and my wife who doesn't work, that she would go to work, and I could just stay. I would love to do a role reversal with my wife, where I could just stay home, do what I want all day, every day, and she goes to work and pays the bills. That would be good. But in terms of like what's good for society, I think it would be what would be best is if we had strong families and good education in the home and these sorts of things.
but why is a woman going out and working not creating a strong family as if the roles were reversed?
Because
That's
she
what you're
has to
saying. You're
be a
making the
mother.
assumption
She has to be
she
a
doesn't
mother.
have to
She
be.
doesn't have to be
She
a
doesn't
mother.
have to
She
be.
doesn't have to be a mother. But if we don't have mothers, we're not going to have a future. So we're going
Well,
to have
she can
some
have
mothers. We're going to have some mothers,
yeah, but being a mother does not mean that she has to stay home and
I
basically
think
be a
it's better for
housekeeper
the
and take care of
family. I think
kids.
it's better for the family.
I disagree. I think what is better for the family is for each family to decide on that.
Yeah, I'm pro-choice. I'm a pro-choice on everything. But even though I give you the choice to do heroin or not, I prefer you didn't. But I'm not going to bully you. I'm not going to be a
Yeah,
dictator. Do the
but you're
heroin
still
if you
going to
want. I'm just letting you
yeah,
know I don't think it's a good idea. You could do the
yeah.
heroin. I don't think it's a good idea. And maybe you'll try it once. You won't get addicted, whatever. But I mean, I'm definitely pro-choice on every sin and on every crime, on everything. But I think that there are principles. I believe that we're created by an all-good God, and that we have a purpose, and my principles are based on that. It's based on ontology and teleology. So
Yeah, but heroin and being a mother are two completely different things. I think that's a terrible
We
metaphor.
could
I'm just
choose
going to say it out loud.
anything. We could choose
Yeah,
anything. Like, I mean, if
absolutely.
little Billy
But
wants to play
being,
baseball, I'd say, sure, that sounds good. And it's good to do athletics. Just, you know, you could take any example, good, bad, or indifferent. But, when it comes to ontology and teleology, what does your Stoicism teach you about what's the ultimate purpose? Do you believe in an eternal universe or an eternal return? Like, what do you believe in terms of ontology? What's going on? What's the ultimate reality?
uh, my personal belief is that there is no God, that what happens beyond our death, I have no idea. And anybody who claims to know so is fooling themselves and trying to fool anybody else because we don't know. And we won't know until we get there. And that's just really the way that it is.
No, but
And
we
so
know we
just,
know with certainty that there's one and only one uncaused first cause, that than which nothing greater can be conceived. This is the God of monotheism, classical theism. We can know that with
yeah, but you
certainty.
don't know for
We can know that
certainty.
with
No, you don't
certainty.
know for
Yes, we do.
certainty.
Yes, we do
No,
know
you
with
can't.
certainty. Yes, we do. Yes, we
No.
can. I've got several proofs. If you want to go through it next time you come on, we can talk about
Okay. Has
the
God come
proofs.
down and talked to you? Has God come
We
down
don't need
and
that.
I mean,
We don't need that. We don't
okay,
need that.
then you
We
can
have
prove it
reason. We have
until,
God-given reason, and we can know with certainty based on causality. We know that cause and effect is real. We know.
well, if it does come, okay, if it does come from reason, then that would mean that any reasoning and rational society would have the exact same God. And that has never been the case.
How many gods do you know of?
Uh, Look at the Nordic gods, look at the Greek gods, look at the Indian gods. The Indians have thousands of gods. Look at the Oriental and Asian gods, the Chinese gods, the Japanese gods, the Korean gods, the Mongolian gods. Every culture has come up with their own set of gods, and they are all different and similar, and they overlap in so many different ways. And so if you will truly believe that the rational thinking came for us so that we could know God, then all of these societies would have done the exact same thing. Then Confucius would have come up with the exact same God that David came up with, that
Yeah,
Moses came up with. It would
there,
be the exact same thing, and
there,
they aren't.
there are
They are
people.
so different from each other.
There are
Are
people.
you telling me that Shiva is the same as Yahweh? No, they aren't. They're totally different.
Well, I've spoken with Hindus on my podcast, and some of them indicate that there is a sort of monotheism hiding in behind all these gods, but there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for the plethora of so-called gods, and it's well explained in my holy books, and it's like
But that's the thing, though. Those are just opinions. Those are what people thought of the world. If I wrote a book and said, "Hey, this is holy," it doesn't make it holy.
right,
And I mean, that's basically what Joseph Smith did. Joseph Smith made up a book. He decided that he was going to make up the Book of Mormon, and he made it up
right,
so that he could have sex and money. That's really what it came down to.
yeah.
It
There's
was
no
something that he completely made up.
But you, but
And
you,
yet you
you just nailed it. You just explained the problem with false religions. The problem with false religions is it's love of self. It's a love of self,
but
and
who's to decide which religion is false? You're making a
we
judgment
use
there.
our reason. We use our reason. We can know.
Okay, but if everybody used the same reason, then we would have the exact same
Right, but
religion.
the reason that Joseph Smith, for example, didn't use his reason properly is because he loved himself unto contempt of the one true God, and he made a false religion because he
Okay,
wanted the women. He wanted the women. Let's just be honest. Okay, he
okay,
wanted the
so you're
women,
saying that
and so
that's
he
what
made a false religion because he loved himself to the contempt of God. Like that's just the way it is.
okay.
There are only
So
two
basically what you're
worldviews.
saying then is any other world religion that is not Christianity is a fake religion
Well,
because it
they're
doesn't have,
all they're all religions are false religions except for one, the true one. Obviously,
yeah, and
use
that's
we
your
can use
problem.
no, but you can't say otherwise. You
You
can't
have a
say
very
you can't.
egocentric view
No,
of
but
things.
listen,
And so
listen.
no, sorry, you're wrong.
I'm not saying that it's Christianity. I'm saying that logically we know that truth does not contradict truth. If there is a true religion, it's the only one. There can't be two mutually contradictory truths. That's impossible. Just use your reason, and you know that there's only one true religion. I'm not saying it's Christianity. I believe it is, but I'm not saying that here to you right now. What I'm saying is there can't be two truths. There's one truth. Okay? Is it Judaism? I don't think so. Is it Islam? I don't think so, but it might be. Is it Christianity? Yeah, I think it is, but I could be wrong. But my point here is not that Christianity is true. My point is that there's only one God and there's only one true religion. And so what that is, that's a project we need to figure out, and it takes a leap of faith also. It's not just pure reason. We can get to God the Father through pure reason, but we can't get to the Trinity through reason. We can't get to the incarnation through reason. That takes a leap of faith. So it's very
Well,
distinct realms, the realm of reason, philosophy, which can bring us a certain knowledge of the uncaused first cause, which is God. And then we have the realm of faith. And so they're two distinct realms. We can't confuse the two. We have to keep those two separate. But yeah, everyone, everyone on the planet is without excuse if they do not conclude, based on the principle of causality, if they do not conclude that there's one and only one uncaused first cause, they are without excuse, because everything that we encounter is contingent. Everything has a cause. And so we have to come to the conclusion that there is one and only one necessary being that is self-existent, whose essence is existence. So yeah, you're without excuse. On Judgment Day, we're going to see each other and we'll wave to each other, and you're going to see that I'm right, that everyone who denied God, the uncaused first cause, everyone will be shown to be without excuse, because we can know it with certainty using our reason, looking at the contingent things around us. We can know it. And if you want to look at Joseph Smith and say, well, why didn't he know it? We already know why, because he was a selfish guy. And I'm selfish too.
okay, so basically you're saying that I'm selfish because I don't believe in God.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. Did you start a new religion? Because
It doesn't
Joseph's,
matter if I start a new
well,
religion.
the reason,
Basically, what you're saying then is, and this is where you're. I mean, we can sit and argue about this, but simply put, what you're saying is that if anybody has rationality, then they should have the same point of view as you, which is that there is a God. So, if that's the case, then why do we have so many different gods? Why do we have so many people who are atheists? Why do we have so many people who have no idea? If it's truly just a product of rationality, then we should all think the same. So I disagree with you in that
how
you
many
have
people
no
have
way
thought
of
about it?
proving
Prove
you
it.
have no way of proving that there is a God.
Sure I do. I have many ways, many ways,
No, you haven't
many,
shown me a
many ways.
single one.
You want to go through some?
You've spouted off some
Do you want to
things
go
that
through? Do you want
absolutely
to
have
go
nothing
through
to
some?
do
We
with
have
it.
15 minutes left. We can go through one of the proofs for the existence of God.
There's no proof for existence of God because there again, proof if you're going to prove something like that, if you're going to prove that there is some being out there, you have to have something, you have some kind of physical proof. Otherwise, it's just something that you make up
Yeah,
in
but
your head.
we have everything around us as physical proof, because everything around us is contingent, right? It was brought into being.
Yeah, it
So
was brought into being and we have
by
no
something
idea how that
else,
happened.
by something
Yeah, by
else, right?
something else for sure.
And
I
so
can
we have
agree
to
that
ask
there is
about
something
that.
else and
We
we
have
have
to
no
ask
idea
about
where
that.
that
We can
came
ask the
from.
same question of the thing that came before it, that caused it,
Yeah.
right? And we can ask the same thing for the thing that came before that. And then, so
Hmm.
that there are really only two possibilities, right? It's an infinite regress, which is impossible, because in every effect, there are the perfections of the cause, and the cause is always more perfect than the effect. So there's always something in the effect that was always present in each one of the causes, in that chain of causes. So we can't have an infinite regress. Therefore, there must be a first cause, right? So that's the simplest of proofs from causality. Aristotle goes through these. St. Thomas Aquinas goes through these and summarizes them, and it's very, very simple. You have
Well,
to.
basically, but it's the question that hasn't been answered though. It's why is there something rather than nothing? And nobody has an answer to that.
But there is something. It's manifest. Like
Yes, there's
this
something,
is
but we
not.
don't know why.
Yeah, we do know why. We do know why. We do know why.
No, you
Because
took a leap of faith. You decided that it was a God, and
no,
so that was
there's no
your
leap of
choice.
faith. There's no faith-based
I'm
belief
I'm saying that it
required.
could be some other interdimensional thing. It could be,
And where did that
it
come
could be
from?
the flying spaghetti monster.
Was
My
the
point
yeah,
is
but
we don't know,
yeah, but we do know.
and we
We do
can't
know.
know.
We do know that the flying spaghetti monster is composed of parts. We know that it's got two balls and a bunch of hair. So we know that it's composed of parts. So it has to have a composer, right? It's caused. It's not absolutely simple. It's composed. So yeah, we can know with certainty, just based on the principle of causality, looking at the contingent objects around us. We know with certainty that there is one and only one uncaused first cause. Maybe you haven't thought
All we
about it.
know
Maybe
is that some
maybe you
no,
haven't
but I
thought about it
have thought
deeply.
about it plenty, but my point is that all we can say is that we know that stuff exists, but we don't know
Contingent
why.
stuff. It's
That's it.
contingent.
We
It's
can
all
say, yes,
contingent.
stuff exists, but we have no idea where it came from, who made it, why it happened, how it happened. We do not understand that. And to claim otherwise, we're not at a level where we can truly understand that. And so we will reach for things. We reach for there's a God, there is some, great father in the sky with a white beard. There's who knows what, but we don't know. And so to claim otherwise is foolhardy of ourselves. And that's a lot of hubris to claim that we know that and to tell other people that they're wrong for the not thinking the way that we are. We know that, yes, stuff exists, but we have no idea why. And we have no idea how it all happened.
We know a lot of things about God, not just that he exists.
We
Okay, God
believe a lot
God
of
is a
things.
mystery.
You believe a
No, we
lot of
know
and
we
when
know
you
with
keep saying
certainty.
no,
We
and it's
know with
really
certainty.
belief.
We know with philosophical certainty. Not just a moral certainty, but with philosophical certainty, just like 1 + 1 = 2, that level of certainty. We know many of the attributes of God. God has to be infinite in every pure perfection, meaning every perfection that is better to have than not to have, because the effect cannot be more perfect than the cause. The cause is always more perfect than the effect. So we know that when we analyze the uncaused first cause, that it is infinite in every pure perfection. We know that. We can know this by the light of natural reason. If you want a really good a posteriori proof of the existence of God, I suggest you look into Blessed John Duns Scotus. He does it really. Uh, it's not easy, but it's a very thorough proof. It's a demonstration according to the strict principles of Aristotle for a strict demonstration, which means not only does the cause have to be, not only does the effect have to be certain and manifest, but the cause itself has to be certain as well. So yeah, it's a very, very strict demonstration, and I
Well,
suggest you
again,
look into it.
those are just ideas that he decided. He was the one who said, "Hey, these are the root ideas that we're going to say are the rules that come into play."
I've
And
met.
based upon those ideas and those rules that he said, so basically, these are the propositions that we're going to say, these are how things line up. But the idea of 1 + 1 = 2, again, is the same idea that one is a whole number. And so therefore, if we add one whole number to another whole number, that's going to equal 2. But that's just an idea that we came up with. That's something that we developed in our minds, and it's not something that is material. So all of these ideas, all of these proofs, they're just thought experiments. They're just ideas that we have in our minds, and they are not anything that proves anything.
Well, you've heard of the laws of thought, the law of contradiction, the law of the excluded middle, and these sorts of things. Um, for one thing, I mean, just the fact is that they're self-evident, right? These are things we can't test or prove because they're self-evident. Just like
Exactly. And
just like
because something is self-evident, you can't say that it is 100. You only things that are truly self-evident, like gravity happening, that there's a wall right here. Those are things that are truly self-evident. Otherwise, basically, we're making assumptions about things. We're believing in a root. These are some root principles that are there, and based upon those ideas, that's why then we can work off of those.
no,
And
but
so
listen,
each of
listen.
these are thought experiments based upon assumptions and presuppositions that they've already
Okay,
created and said, according to these rules, that's the
yeah,
game.
but you see, I've got this mug here, right? I've got this mug. It seems to be real, and my fingers tap into it. If I can feel it, I can hear it, I can even smell the contents. Okay, all of this depends on physical, material sense perceptions, allegedly. But the problem is
Atomic structures.
the problem with that is that there's no philosophical proof, much less an empirical proof, that our alleged sense perceptions actually correspond to an outer world or other people. There's
Okay,
absolutely no
I
test
can
that's
agree with
possible
that.
for that. There's no possible test for that. So this is how I came to believe in God, was going down the rabbit hole of radical doubt. And I did this independent of Descartes, but it just so happened that I read Descartes shortly thereafter, and I was already a hard solipsist at the time, which is sort of like the Western version of Buddhism, where I was the sort of disembodied mind of Buddha. But reading Rene Descartes, he talks about that, and he doubts everything that can be doubted, and the only thing that he can't doubt, and the only thing that I can't doubt, or that you can't doubt, is our own being. I can't when I deny I can deny your existence. That's rational. But when I deny my own existence, I'm affirming my existence, right? So if you really want to uh, discover the uncaused first cause, you should not acknowledge reality and the other person. You should not acknowledge this physical universe and take that for granted, because that's a big mistake. You need to doubt that. You need to go past that. Your sense perceptions cannot be tested. So we need something deeper. We need to build our foundations on something deeper. And it's the I am. And there's no coincidence that God's name, his proper name, is I am. If you read in the book of Exodus, I believe it is, where the burning bush scene, Moses asks what God's name is. He said, I am. So I don't think it's a coincidence that this is the one thing we can know with certainty, is that I am. And from there, it's a very short leap into monotheism. And that's exactly how I became a monotheist. So,
We're going to have to disagree on that, but that's okay.
well, you can't disagree with me that that's how I came to monotheism. You can't disagree with me about that. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, true,
That's how
true.
I
I
came
can't
to
disagree
that's
with,
how I
yes,
came to
yes, very true.
that's how
Yes,
I
I
came to
can't disagree
monotheism.
with your experience. Yes, I can disagree that if there is a God or not.
Right, but
I can disagree, and my opinion is no, there
yeah,
isn't.
but
I have no idea what comes next.
but the problem is, and we will wrap it up here. The problem is that you don't have any justification or proof for the existence of the material universe or the other person, the person that's talking to you right now. You're just taking it, not even on a leap of faith, just on a naive assumption that reality is real, right? Like this is why I think a lot of people don't understand who and what God is because they're mired in a naive realism where they're taking for granted the fact that there's a material universe and that there are other people, and they're not going beyond that. They have never doubted that, right? So I don't know if you've if you've ever doubted the existence of the material world and other people, but it's a very, very dark place to be. It's the second darkest place I think that you can go. The first darkest being nihilism. I was not a nihilist, but I was a hard solipsist, where I thought that I was the only being. So I think that you and other listeners that don't believe in God need to go beyond your naive realism, and that's the technical term. It's not an insult or a slur. That's the technical term for it, where you just take for granted the world. So that would be my homework assignment for you before we talk again next time.
No, I mean, I've thought about it quite often. For me, the way that I look at it is simply this. I deal with reality as it is because that's the material world that I live in. Do I believe that
Allegedly,
there's something?
allegedly. You don't have any proof for that. You don't
That's
even
why I
have a
said, well,
theory.
that's why I said it, because I believe it's the world that I live in.
Huh.
So if that's the case, if that's not the case, it doesn't really matter because if it, think of it as like, this is the video game I'm playing, so I'm going to play the video game because there's no other option besides offing myself, which I don't really want to do because I'm enjoying this video game. What comes after this, what came before this, I have no idea, and there's no way to prove it, and I'm okay with that. And coming to peace with that was something that is important. Do I hope that there's something after this? Yes, because I enjoy my existence. I enjoy thinking. I enjoy the idea that there is something after this. But am I going to delude myself? Am I going to follow some kind of dogma that somebody else tells me, hey, this is how it is? No, because it doesn't resonate with me whatsoever.
I don't know if you can see that because my screen's backwards today. I don't know why. Everything's
Yeah.
upside down, topsy turvy. But
It,
yeah.
it looks good coming this way, so it's correct on
Oh,
that.
it was? Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So it was great to meet you. I'm gonna have to let you go, but I hope you come back next time, and I hope I wasn't too annoying with my particular take on the uncaused first cause there. But it's something I'm passionate about because I did go down a very dark rabbit hole with philosophy, and it was I saw the light, sort of thing. So, and I could be wrong. I could be wrong about Jesus Christ. Maybe he's not the Lord. Maybe he's a lunatic, a liar, or a mere legend. But I don't think so. I think he's the Lord. So if the God that I worship is real, if he's real, and he exists, what would you say to him right now? Just what would you express to this God that you currently don't believe in? What would you say?
Well, do I believe Jesus Christ is a historical figure? Very
No, no,
possibly.
no, 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 no. I'm not asking about that. I'm not talking about
Mm.
Christianity. I'm saying if the uncaused first cause is real and uh, is watching us right now and listening, what would you say to the uncaused first cause?
Um, I really wouldn't have much to say except
Really?
when I die. Yeah, when I die, I'll see you when I see you.
Uh,
So,
so it's a sort of a trick question, but I'm always curious to see what people would say. So listen, where can people find your podcast? I put a link in the description. It was stoic.coffee
yeah.
and stoic.coffee/join. What does the join do?
That's from my community that I have. I think that link is still up. I've had so much going on the last couple of months of selling my house and basically getting ready to leave the country that I think it's still there, but I haven't.
I could check it right
The
now.
community's been it's the community hasn't been as active as it had been in the past, so that's something that I'm working on.
It's still there.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
1 year membership, access 30-day self-discipline challenge course, meet other like-minded Stoics, etc. Yeah, so the link works. Cool. Victor, writer in Spain. Anastasia, a doctor in
Okay. Yeah.
Tasmania. Wow.
Yep. Yeah, it's a very diverse crowd. It was really so, uh, really just a good group of interesting people, so
Cool. Very cool. So I always ask my guests to leave a final thought, something positive, uplifting, hopeful, for my listeners. And my listeners are very diverse, very diverse. A small group of listeners, but very diverse in terms of their worldviews. So, what's a one size fits all message of positivity and hope that you could leave?
um, I think for me, the biggest kinda takeaway that I've had from at least Stoic philosophy, because the Stoics were also very big on empathy and compassion towards other people, because most people don't, there's this great line, I can't remember the exact verbiage from it, but Marcus Aurelius talks about how when you get up in the morning, you're going to meet with the greedy and the ugly and the angry and the people who are trying to use you, all of these things that they try to do, and they're just going to be really challenging to work with. And the reason why they're challenging to work with is simply that they don't know good from evil. And really, it's that idea of most people, again, don't assume malice when ignorance is more likely. Most people are not out to be mean. They're not out to do horrible things in the world. Most people just want to live their lives. They want to, take care of their families, those types of things. So the more often you can assume that somebody might just be slightly ignorant and treat them with that kind of compassion and basically cut people some slack. I think that's really we need to do a lot more in our world. Even if you disagree. I mean, like we sat and disagree pretty hard on this, but it doesn't mean that I have any ill will towards you. I mean, I will disagree very firmly and I will hold to my beliefs on things, but it doesn't mean that I need to, think poorly of you or treat you poorly simply because we disagree on things. And I think people forget that just because people don't think like you or believe like you does not mean that you need to treat them poorly. In fact, you need to hold on to your principles of compassion and kindness towards other people when it's hard, not when it's easy. Because loving somebody when it's hard is much bigger test and a much bigger show and that you actually do live your principles than loving somebody and being compassionate towards them when they're being loving and compassionate towards you.
Yeah, well, that was well said. She's not quite a saint yet, but there's a Catholic thinker, a woman who's she's a little bit controversial because people see her as left wing and kind of progressive or whatever, which maybe you like,
Mhm.
but I really like her, and she said something about how to love God and how much you think you love God and how much you really love God, and this doesn't apply so much to you because you don't know God, but she said the person that you love the least on this planet, the person that you love the least, that amount of love that you have for that person, that's how much you love God. That much. Not
Yeah.
more. Not more. So, I mean, this is a Catholic principle. We have to love everyone, our friends, family, enemies. We have to love everyone because God loves them and because God created them and because Christ died for them. And so it's not easy. No, it's not easy. We think about, for example, the pedophile priests or some of these fundamentalist LDS people that did horrible things.
Yeah.
Just two off the top of my head, like two examples. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard to love them, but we have to. You have to. And from your perspective, we have to, for the sake of coherence and compassion and just to be well adjusted and to live in reality. And the same from my side, but there's a little bit more on my side because your eternal destiny depends on it. Like I mean, heaven and hell are real, and one is pleasant and one is unpleasant, and so you talked about acknowledging the the or attributing to ignorance rather than to malice or ill will someone's sharp words or attitude or whatever, um, and that's good. But from a Christian perspective, we also have to think about caring for these souls in terms of their journey to heaven. And if you don't believe in heaven and hell or God, then you might not want Christians reaching out and caring for people in that way, because you think it's a mistaken, uh, a misguided concern and care. But you also have to acknowledge that from within our worldview, within the self-consistent and coherent worldview that we have as Christians, and I'm not saying that there aren't incoherencies and inconsistencies that creep in because of our human frailty, but on paper and ideally it's coherent. From our perspective, you have to acknowledge and accept the fact that from our perspective, there is a project to get people, our brothers and sisters, to heaven. So,
Yeah, but I think that along with that, though, is that they're the ones who need to make that choice, and I think
of
that's
course,
where
of course, of course.
I think that's one of the hardest things that I see in a lot of, especially strict fundamentalist type religions, is that if somebody chooses not to take that choice, then they are excluded
Yeah,
and they are shunned, and I've
yeah,
seen that in all types of different religions. But yeah,
yeah,
and that I find a lack of respect of other people's free will and loving them anyway and treating them exactly the same regardless of the choices that they make.
yeah. I agree with you 100%. But I'm also sympathetic to people who live in sort of like a cult-like religious setting, and they just sort of like that Borg hive mind, that just sort of takes over. And I've watched so many documentaries on cults that I know that like regular nice people, they fall into this pattern of behavior. And I mean, I want to blame them, but it's kind of hard to blame them when it's just like it's a psychological thing where we're susceptible, we're susceptible to believing lies and then perpetuating lies. Like that's just a fact.
Hmm.
And when Jesus came to earth, he saw the Jews, they belonged to the true religion, but they were perverting it with all kinds of man-made traditions and lies. And Christ's biggest enemies when he walked the earth were not the prostitutes and the tax collectors. It was the Pharisees, the strict, rigorous, right-wing religious people. So, you know,
Yeah.
so God's well aware of what's happening. The perversion of His name and the perversion of religion. It's the worst. It's the absolute worst thing. And the word bigotry comes from by God, where you're doing everything in the name of God, this by God and that by God, and then they
Hmm.
just end up calling these people bigots. So it's the absolute worst thing. But I've got plenty more to talk to you about. But hopefully you'll come back. Hopefully you had an okay time. And if I reach out to you in 6 months, are you going to be in North America, or where are you going to be? Europe?
I'll be in Europe. At least that's the goal. So yeah, we'll see what
You have a
happens.
loose
So
itinerary, or?
Amsterdam first, also
Ooh,
some time in Berlin, and then
ooh,
don't know after that. So
whoa! Have you been there before?
I've been to Austria for a couple of years, so I haven't been to
Ah.
Amsterdam or Berlin yet. So
Yeah, well, Amsterdam is probably my number one favorite city in Europe, and I liked Berlin a lot too. Good music scene there, and I was there for the Love Parade just coincidentally with my wife. And yeah, we used to live in Belgium. We've lived in Greece. We've lived in
okay,
Scotland and England. And yeah, Amsterdam is amazing. I mean, I don't smoke drugs or anything, and I don't screw prostitutes. But I mean, that's not the part of Amsterdam that I like. I like the vibe. I always like progress. I'm not very progressive myself, but I like progressive cities. I like that sort of loose vibe. Here in Montreal, I don't know if you know, but I'm in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. It's like a
okay.
sort of like Sin City of the North. It's very sinful and dirty, and I like it that way. I like to be here. I've been to some more uptight, clean, and pristine white cities, and I just don't like it. I'm not comfortable. I like to be with lots of immigrants and culture, and if there's a bit of corruption and sin or whatever, it just makes me feel more comfortable. You know? So, anyway, have a great trip, and it was nice talking to you. And I think I follow you on Twitter, so maybe I'll see you on Twitter.
All right, sounds good.
Take good care, my friend.
All right, we'll
Bye
catch you
bye.
later.
Catch you later. Bye bye.
Bye.